COVID-19 cases continue to slide as Plateau tops chart for new cases on Monday. Federal government warns states against hasty schools reopening. In international news, Black Lives Matter protests continue in the UK while US President Donald Trump defends teen gunman in deadly Kenosha shooting. And in sport, Nigeria missed out on online powerlifting World Cup.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. For 2 days in a row, Plateau State has recorded more new coronavirus cases than any other states in the nation. Of the 143 new cases recorded on Monday by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, Plateau recorded 35. NCDC says 16 other states and the Federal Capital Territory recorded at least one new infection each. Good news, no COVID-19 death was recorded on Monday. Nigeria's total tally stands at 54,008 cases, slightly more than 1,000 fatalities. NCDC says more than 41,000 patients have been discharged from various isolation facilities across the country. Meanwhile, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, PTF, has cautioned states that are planning to fully reopen schools to be guided by experiences from other countries like France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. He said some cities in those countries have experienced more confirmed COVID-19 cases and fatalities after reopening their educational sectors. PTF Chairman Boss Mustafa said during the daily briefing on Monday, although the task force is not against schools reopening, such plans should comply with COVID-19 protocols. He said COVID-19 is still potent and very dangerous in the country. Mustafa said as the country prepares to reopen more sectors, everyone must be steadfast and continue with a winning strategy, which he says is hooked to the ability of the country's health institutions to contain the virus. Lagos and Osun states plan to reopen educational activities on September the 21st. Still at the PTF briefing, Minister of State for Education, Chukwuemeka Nwajoba, says the students who first tested positive for COVID-19 during the ongoing 2020 West African Senior School Certificate examination have now tested negative and have been discharged. Nwajoba said the students have returned to classes after receiving treatment. He said all of them have now tested negative for the new coronavirus. He says Gombe State had 4 of the students, Kwara had 1. Nwajoba said all the ones in Bayelsa have also tested negative and have been discharged. The impact of the new coronavirus pandemic on Nigeria's foreign exchange is being felt now, especially as so many factors have combined to worsen the situation. Oil revenues have basically dried to a drip while the COVID-19 lockdown made negative waves in the economy. Correspondent Deji Badmus reports on the impact of all of this in the country's forex market.
The last time Nigeria experienced the current forex liquidity shortage was in 2016. When the country slipped into recession. With another recession looming, the problem has resurfaced, and the course is not uniquely different from the last time. A fall in oil price, the country's main source of forex earnings, and a drop in remittances flow as a result of global disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic have both combined to hurt the country's forex revenue. Even foreign investments too have been greatly impacted.
The focus in Nigeria, unfortunately, has been with the portfolio investors. And they come in and out, and when the conditions are good, they're in. When the conditions are bad, they're out. But FDI is more calculated, is more focused on the long-term economic growth and development. And clearly, Nigeria is probably doing under $2 billion a year in FDIs.
Nigeria's capital market has been badly hit as a result of the situation, as foreign portfolio investors bid for the gates, seeking alternative markets.
For most of the foreign investors bought the FMDQ OTC features contract, FX features contract rather, and it's a Naira non-deliverable forward that they get naira and they still have to source for their dollars. So what we've been seeing now is that for most of the foreign investors, despite the assurances from the CBN, for most of them have not been able to repatriate their proceeds.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has so far carried out 2 rounds of devaluation as part of its strategy to ease the pressure on the local currency and bring about a single exchange rate for the country. It also added some new items on its list of items banned from accessing forex through the official market. Even banks too have had to ration the sale of forex and review spending limits of customers. But the scarcity still persists, and some analysts say the situation could go on for the next 18 months if oil prices continue to remain low.
So at the point when oil prices are over $100 a barrel, then you should see the naira appreciate against the dollar. And at a time when oil prices are low, you should see the naira devalued. But basically, because you have a static exchange rate regime, we've suffered devaluation and we're not seeing that revaluation.
We need to ensure that our foreign exchange policy incentivizes investment, allows or encourages inflow of foreign capital and foreign direct investment. We need to remove the current level of uncertainty around a lot of policy issues.
The National Bureau of Statistics here has just released the GDP figures of the country for the second quarter. Not surprisingly, the economy contracted by 6%, even though oil continues to account for around 9% of the entire GDP. Fact is, if prices do not go up, the entire economy will continue to feel the shock. And of course, the forex challenge will continue to bite harder.
Coming up, African stories. African countries seek to standardize COVID-19 testing procedures. And later, international news. Black Lives Matter protests continue in the UK while US President Donald Trump defends teen gunman in deadly Kenosha shooting.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. As COVID-19 virus through the African continent, response in different countries have been varied. Testing procedures have taken different forms in different regions. Now, the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention wants to standardize the process. Correspondent Koleti Wanjoha has the details.
Movement across African borders is slowly starting to resume. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit Africa, the continent has lost over $8 billion from the stagnation of travel. The African Union estimates a further loss of $50 billion due to a halt in tourism activities. It hopes the travel industry can be resuscitated in a way that will not endanger the health of citizens.
We have drafted clear guidelines and guidance on what to do in airports, what to do on the aircrafts, how to, for the passengers, and of course all the work that we have been doing has been done closely and with the direct participation of the WHO.
The Africa CDC says for this to happen, there must be what it calls trusted testing, where results are recognized across the continent.
There are about 23 countries that are requiring testing and require different levels of testing. Some are requiring that you have not more than 72 hours. Some actually require that when you arrive at the airport with a COVID-19 certificate showing you are negative, you still do another test. And some require even after the test, even with your negative, you go into quarantine.
The continent has already surpassed the 1 million mark for positive COVID-19 cases. The Africa CDC insists that as countries reopen their economies, case numbers need to be kept under control. But it says this will only happen if individual countries implement public health measures and keep their citizens constantly aware of how to prevent themselves from catching the virus. It also advises countries to restrict reopening activities in regions within their borders that are still experiencing high levels of transmission.
Ghana has reopened its airports for international travel after 5 months of closure. The country has spelled out a wonder of procedures that would govern arrivals, including COVID-19 tests at the airport. Correspondent Nabil Ahmed Rufai has the details.
A final disinfection of officers at the Kotoka International Airport in Accra. Ghana says it is now ready to reopen its airspace for international travel.
It is mandatory for any airline coming to Ghana to ensure that passengers have face masks on. But you know that some of our people will be coming from afar. If you are traveling from London, you probably travel like 6 hours. And so when you land at Kotoka Airport, and you come through the passenger boarding bridge, when you get to the edge of entering the terminal building, we give you a fresh face mask.
Airport officials say they will ensure safe distancing among passengers at the airport terminals, as well as limit the number of people that come to welcome visitors at the airport. Both departing and arriving passengers will also have their temperatures taken and made to sanitize their hands.
We intend to make the operational system smooth, with very little inconvenience for the arriving and departing passengers. To be specific, the stakeholders have brought about significant physical transformation of the halls, that's the arrival and departure, with new infrastructure, including the installation of COVID-19 testing devices.
Like many countries, Ghana's aviation industry has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. The country's Civil Aviation Authority says it has lost almost 95% of its revenue due to a ban on foreign travel since March. As the country's airspace begins to reopen for international traffic, it hopes things can begin to improve.
Port health officials say all passengers will be made to take a mandatory COVID-19 test when they land at this airport, and they will have to bear the cost of $150 for the test.
The test result is expected to be ready within 30 minutes. Passengers who test negative will be allowed to leave the airport, while those who test positive for COVID-19 will be isolated by port health officials for further assessment. With these measures put in place, the government hopes the aviation industry can once again take off.
Maybe some Egyptians did not know the laws governing participation in elections, but 54 million of them are set to face fines after missing Senate polls. As Adil El-Marouki reports, processing fines for 54 million Egyptians may pose a challenge.
More than half the Egyptian population could get prosecuted for not casting their ballot in the Senate election held earlier this month. The law stipulates that citizens who do not vote should be fined up to $31.5. That means if all those who fail to vote get fined, that could translate in $1.7 billion being raised through fines by the government.
The purpose of the law is not to push for fines, but rather create incentives for citizens to participate in the elections and increase the turnout. This is legislation, and the Elections Committee has to follow the procedures which the law enforces. The implementation of the fines is very hard because it has not been done before, and the numbers involved are very high.
According to the election law, citizens have the right to appeal against the fine. They're allowed by law to skip voting if they have a valid reason, such as travel, work commitment, or if they were sick. The Egyptian prosecution will have the huge task of investigating 54 million different cases on top of its already piled up workload.
It could be an additional burden, but it's the law and it has to be done. The prosecution has to issue the fine, then it moves it to court. The prosecution has the right to push for trial or not. If it wants, the prosecution will launch a quick investigation. I don't think it can go case by case.
Since 2011, the voting fines have always been an issue after all elections, but the fines have never been imposed. Yet it's still a subject that sparks debate in the Egyptian streets.
They must know why people didn't vote. For me, the voting centers were far from my new residence. The government is the reason the voting wasn't easy for us. It is unjust to impose fines. I wish the president would stop this process. People do not have enough money to get food. They can't pay fines. That should not happen. It's not fair.
Only 9 million Egyptians voted in the Senate election to choose 200 members. The Egyptian president appoints the remaining 100 members of the upper house. It only enjoys an advisory role. Therefore, it has much less power than the House of Representatives.
It has become the norm for the fines issued to erupt after every election in Egypt. But because only 14% turned out to vote for the Senate, much more Egyptians could relate to it this time.
When we return, international news. Black Lives Matter protests continue in the UK while US President Donald Trump defends teen gunman in deadly Kenosha shooting. And later, sport. Nigeria miss out on online powerlifting World Cup.
You are watching ANN. Somewhere in the world, every second of the day, news is happening. And of course, Nigeria is bustling with news day and night. That is why ANN doesn't sleep. Our eyes are peeled, wide open, so no story escapes our radar. We stay abreast of world events and happenings at home. We keep you up to the minute in the world of sports. We give you information to stay on top of your investments and all the hard facts you need to navigate your day. If you miss us on air, you can keep up to date on our website and on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. We are ANN, African News Network. We do news right in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. U.S. President Donald Trump has openly defended teenage gunman Kyle Rittenhouse, who opened fire during demonstrations in Kenosha last Tuesday. 2 persons were confirmed killed in that shooting. 17-year-old Rittenhouse was arrested and is now facing 2 charges of first-degree homicide and 1 charge of attempted first-degree homicide. U.S. President Donald Trump says the accused gunman was trying to get away and would have been killed by demonstrators if he had not opened fire. But many say the teenager should never have been there, being from the neighboring state of Illinois. They also question how he got his hands on the assault rifle he took to the scene, and with which he killed 2 persons and injured another. Rittenhouse's lawyer says he will argue that Rittenhouse shot in self-defense. Trump is scheduled to visit Kenosha as early as today, even as the city mayor and the Wisconsin governor said the president was not welcome there. United States Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and Pacific Affairs, David Stilwell, has announced the U.S. is establishing a new bilateral economic dialogue with Taiwan aimed at strengthening ties with Taipei and supporting it in the face of increasing pressure from Beijing. Washington has also declassified 6 security assurances given to Taiwan during the era of U.S. President Ronald Reagan. Stilwell said the U.S. is intensifying support to the island because of the increasing threat posed by Beijing to peace and stability in the region. Washington broke off former diplomatic ties with Taipei in 1979 in favor of Beijing, but the U.S. is bound by law to help Taiwan defend itself and is the main arms supplier to the island. Hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets of West London on Sunday in the first ever million-persons march to protest against systemic racism in the UK. The march takes place this year in lieu of the annual Notting Hill Carnival, which was held online this year because of coronavirus. Organizers said they aimed to incorporate the same spirit of freedom through peaceful protest. Now, Wade Jabakir reports.
The last weekend of August usually sees hundreds of thousands of people in this area in what is an explosion of colour, dancing and music. It's a celebration of Afro-Caribbean culture. But while the carnival is off, some people have still turned up here. They've come for an unofficial Black Lives Matter protest. They're looking to use the platform to highlight racial inequality amid a pandemic that's disproportionately affected people who are black and minority ethnic.
I think it's important that something, we need change. I've got a child, younger relatives, and we need to have change because it's been like this for far too long.
The Carnival Festival is really, it's a sign of black British culture, and it's also been a huge symbol of the fact that black British people are contributing so much to society.
It's really important, right now in this pandemic, to highlight these issues, because otherwise it's just going to happen again. We'll never defeat these kinds of problems in society unless we address the racist divisions which are causing them.
The protesters are marching along much of the traditional route of the carnival before ending in London's Hyde Park. As for the festival itself, the streets around Notting Hill are much quieter this year. It's the first time they've looked like this since the carnival started in 1966.
Many luxury fashion brands had to close their stores worldwide for months due to the COVID-19 pandemic, leaving them with huge stockpiles of unsold, now out-of-season merchandise. The Italian brand Brunello Cuccinelli's answer to this problem is to give away all of the unsold merchandise. Correspondent Hermione Kitson has the details.
He's Italy's self-made King of Cashmere, whose designs date back 4 decades. But even for Brunello Cuccinelli, this is a period like no other.
It's been a particularly painful and intense period that I would like to call a moment of passage towards a new life.
Europe's longest COVID lockdown took its toll on the luxury brand, leaving 30 million euros worth of clothing unsold in shops worldwide. Now Mr. Cuccinelli will donate it all.
We've decided this surplus of new products should be destined for humanity. We will send these packets to parts of the world where we have friends and partners.
This is a generous company for both workers and the rest of the world, so this project is really a reflection of the owner's soul.
Synonymous with the brand is Solomeo, a medieval village in the picturesque hills of Perugia that he spent years restoring.
We wanted this village to be how it once was, as a centre of production for olive oil, wheat and wine 1 century ago, and now of cashmere.
The company employs 2,000 people around the world. Half are based here in Solomeo, and despite the economic challenges of recent months, no jobs have been lost. The well-being of workers is at the company's core.
The fact that Mr. Cuccinelli said our jobs are secure for the next 2 years has prevented our families from suffering more than we already have due to the pandemic.
And despite this period of uncertainty, they're looking ahead to 2021.
Just last week we launched the Spring-Summer collection physically in every part of the world, from Shanghai to New York and Milan. And it seems we've created the best collection of the past 40 years.
The businessman and philosopher says now is the time to act for generations to come.
Don't plan just for the next 3 and 30 years, but also the next 300 and 1,000 years. Don't be scared, be courageous, and tomorrow transform your fears into hope.
Up next, sports. Nigeria miss out on online para-powerlifting World Cup. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Sports. Nigerian Powerlifting Federation says the country could not join the World Powerlifting Online World Cup, which took place on Monday on Facebook because athletes could not train. The Online World Cup is the first Paralympics competition created during the COVID-19 pandemic in a bid to keep athletes active and motivated at home, and also to celebrate a year before the 2020 Games in Tokyo. 54 athletes from 21 countries submitted videos to participate in the competition, with Benin, Cape Verde, Egypt, Lithuania, and Spain making their debuts. 16-year-old Coco Gauff's hopes of launching another deep run at the Grand Slam ended in the first round at the US Open on Monday. The US teenager lost to Latvia's Anastasia Sevastova. Gauff's became a sensation last year when she was the youngest player in the tournament's history to qualify for the main draw. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.